The digital revolution has transformed societies, economies, and governance structures across the globe. This calls for an analysis of the implications of AI in cyber attacks and how these developments are recalibrating traditional security paradigms. With that, this edition of the Geo Interview calls upon Mr. Bruce Schneier, a globally renowned authority on cybersecurity and technology, and also an adjunct lecturer on public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. Sir, it's an absolute pleasure to be able to host you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Wonderful, sir. Let's get right down to it. For the first question, we'll have a sort of base, right? Uh, what do you think of the role of cyber attacks, right, in the ongoing conflicts? You have conflicts in the Middle East, you have them in Eastern Europe. What is your say on cyber attacks?
I think we're seeing cyber attacks exist primarily in what's been called the gray zone between peace and war. So, we're seeing China against the US, US against China, Israel against Arab states, the other way around, Russia against the Ukraine, Ukraine against Russia. They're being used as part of conflict and also in the lead up to conflict, in times when there isn't actual hostilities, but cyber attacks often don't rise to the level of a bombing or something that, attacks life and property. They're increasingly common around the world, and I think they're sort of here to stay as this interstitial area between war and peace.
Absolutely, sir. I totally agree with you. So for our first question, sir, with respect to this, I'm pretty sure you must be aware of the high debate on government-mandated backdoors for encrypted systems. And how do you basically assess the risk-benefit paradigm, right? Where on one side you have defense or national security, if you will, and on the contrary, you have individual privacies or citizen liberties.
Well, it's the other
And
way around, right? National security requires no backdoors, right? So if you're concerned about national security and, this thing is in the pocket of every elected official and, oh, I don't know, judge and police officer and CEO and nuclear power plant operator and election official, these must be as secure as possible, right? So no backdoors. So if you're thinking national security, the last thing you want is backdoors. Now, I mean, you will hear the police who only care about one narrow slice of national security, and that is solving crimes, say, we need these devices to be insecure so we can solve crimes. That is, of course, idiotic, right? I mean, it would be terrible for national security to give the police that. The police need the ability to solve crimes, and to give them good forensic ability in the digital age is important, but sacrificing national security for the police requirements is just plain stupid.
absolutely, sir. For the next question, sir, we have the role of basically international cooperation in the cybersecurity arena, right? Especially given the polarizing views on surveillance and, on the other hand, as I mentioned previously, citizen liberties, right? So, what do you think of this dilemma given the current geopolitical flux,
Right.
if you will?
It's hard. I mean, cyber crime is international. When you think about ransomware or some of the cryptocurrency scams or just the regular scams, they don't respect borders. So a lot of these crimes happen by gangs in Russia or sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia, and they target, richer countries. So we actually need a lot of cooperation in cybercrime. But what you said is the international rules are different. We're not getting the US and Russia to cooperate. If we cooperate with China, they're going to want what the US considers to be valid political speech to be considered something that's a crime. So this is extraordinarily challenging. And we see some of the challenges, but I think there are a lot more. It's hard because, in a sense, the internet is one set of values. It's hard to balkanize, and they tend to be the American Western libertarian Silicon Valley values, which are not shared by necessarily other countries, even like France or Singapore or Japan or Australia or even Canada, right? So I don't know how to navigate this. We need to, right? Figure out how countries can have sovereignty in this very international space, while at the same time facilitating cooperation for actual crimes.
Well, what I take away from that, sir, is that basically this is a very subjective matter based on uh, even constitutional principles and whatnot, going back to
But
the makeup of these
some of
countries.
it is and some of it isn't. We all
Mhm.
recognize that ransomware is a crime. We all recognize that fraud is a crime. We have different definitions of free speech. The United States is a world outlier on free speech law, right? But which means we can't just export the US definition to the rest of the world without there being pushback. But we believe our definition is right and is better. So where does that leave other countries? And it's interesting, there's countries that actually can do something about it. I mean, if you are a major country, if you're a China, you're in India, you're EU, right? You have the number of people, the economic power to do something. But if you are, a small South American country, a small Asian country, a small African country, there's not a lot you can do, right? You are forced to accept the technology that you're given. You can't go to Facebook and say, make these changes. Facebook will say no.
And do you perhaps see a timeline in the future where this reverses?
I don't know, right? It doesn't seem to be getting better. It seems to be getting worse. So I don't know what a timeline is.
Right, sir, understood. So, given your experience in both technical and policy domains, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the translation of cybersecurity research into proper, implementable, and effective public policy?
Policy is hard, and policy lags technology. The RSA conference, the biggest industry conference, was in California 2 months ago, and there are thousands of companies, and a lot of their products will never see the light of day, not because they're not good, but because the market isn't ready for them. Right? There isn't enough regulation to incent companies to invest in cybersecurity. So I think there's a lot of interplay between the economics and policy. I want to see stronger policy. I like what the EU is doing with the Digital Markets Act, the Digital Services Act, the AI Act, even uh, their I'm blanking on it, GDPR. Right? I mean, all of these laws working together incent companies to invest in security, and that's good, right? That spurs innovation.
Right, sir. With the recent rise of quantum computing and its rise is in fact, gaining momentum, right? What do you see as the urgent priorities, say, of governments around the world, whether they be democratic or any other form of system, to ramp up security measures and prepare for the unknown possibilities that lie in this domain?
I mean, luckily there are no urgent priorities. I mean, that's the best, right? We don't want to do this when there's an emergency, right? We don't have yet a working, functional, useful quantum computer. And I mean, I think that's good that we have time. The way to think of it is the math is ahead of the physics right now. So what we're doing is moving to quantum secure algorithms. And there is a competition, which is being run by NIST, the US Standards Organization, for worldwide standards on post-quantum cryptography. And it's going really well. And we are seeing several algorithms that have been approved as standards, and companies are right now migrating their systems to these new algorithms. And that's what's important. It's not really about quantum, it's about crypto agility, that we need our systems to be agile for any advancements in cryptanalysis that require us to swap algorithms. Not just quantum, could be anything. And I think we're getting better at that. We still have a ways to go. But ideally, nobody listening to this podcast needs to do anything, right? It's the companies that supply the systems that we all use that need to do things. And it seems like they are doing things. Excuse me, they are doing things. So, I think we're doing okay right now.
And do you see quantum as a greater viable option in the future, or should we stick to what we're doing right now?
What do you mean by quantum as a viable option?
Quantum computing.
Quantum computing, we don't know, right? I mean, uh, there are now toy quantum computers, and there's a lot of engineering before they get useful. And we don't know if it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or never. It seems like we're moving in that direction. My guess is 5 to 10 years. That also means I have no idea. I mean, it could be anything.
Right, sir.
Is it viable? Maybe. We will see. And if it is, we will. We already have quantum resistant algorithms, so we're doing well. But as I said, the math is ahead of the physics. The matter is implementation, like getting companies like Microsoft to put these algorithms in Windows, right? To get Apple to put them in the phone. That's what we need to see.
Got it, got it. And so, given your rather extensive contribution to literature on social and economic forces in cybersecurity in the domain, how would you envision, say, policymakers, right, best aligning their economic incentives with societal betterment?
I mean, that just has to be done. I mean, I don't know. There's a best way to do it. You need to do it. I think over the past several decades, we've really ignored societal benefit in favor of markets. The market gets to decide, which basically means the money gets to decide, which means the rich people get to decide, which is a dumb way to organize society. I want to see more democratic systems for deciding on what we as society do. That feels really important to me. And I don't think I have any magic for how to do that. I think you just have to do it.
Right, so there should definitely be more bureaucratic willingness.
Yeah, I mean, it's willingness and ability, it's money in politics. There's a lot of things going on right now, and I'm not sure how to fix them. I think about them a lot, but we need to. We need to figure out how to fix them.
So you've described complexity as the enemy of security and surveillance, right? If we come to, say, the Indian context, there's bound to be a level of complexity given the systemic makeup of our country and, of course, our 1.4 billion citizens, right? And especially with the growing IT sector in India, how do you posit that, say, policymakers, right, they effectively counter complexity to the extent possible?
It's interesting. Complexity is the worst enemy of security. Doesn't mean you don't have complexity. It just means complex systems are harder to secure. And you know this, right? Your home is easier to secure than a giant office building because that latter is this thing is more complex. We have strategies for dealing with complexity, right? Compartmentalization is one, defense in depth. We could talk about how we secure complex systems, but it is harder. And you're right, a large country like in India, the big systems are necessarily complex. I mean, think of Andahar, as an example of a nationwide, right, the largest identity system on the planet that has to work at a variety of tech levels, in a variety of contexts, at a variety of different trust levels. That was hard. It doesn't mean you didn't do it. It means it was hard. And there are probably vulnerabilities in the system, but it's working pretty well, right? I mean, it's not like this is a failure. So, when I teach this in class, I don't say necessarily that complexity is bad, just recognize this as a pressure that makes security harder.
We absolutely relate to you, sir. In India, we've got this everlasting boom of digital public infrastructure, and that, of course, brings with it great surveillance and record keeping and whatnot. So, given your advocacy for government intervention in the cybersecurity arena, right, as a necessity you've mentioned, right, what lessons do you think India can learn to better implement cybersecurity safety structures into national governance, local governance, even?
I don't have a lot of insight into India in particular, but my guess is the problems aren't unique. I mean, the thing about the internet, about technology, about computers is they're universal. I mean, you and I use the same operating systems, the same programs, the same web browsers. I mean, we the same phones. They're not different. So there are, I think, very few problems unique to a country. Where the uniqueness is in the policy, right? How much leverage the government has, what the government can mandate, what the people will permit the government to mandate. And I don't know enough about India to comment. I mean, what we said is, you're an enormous country. I mean, you make us look small, which is hard because we're pretty big. And that is going to have challenges. But I don't know enough about the Indian context. But my guess is, the risks of banks in India is the same as the risk of banks in the United States, right? There's money there and criminals want it. And you're using the same back-end systems we are.
Going back to the introduction of this interview, I mentioned how the digital revolution is transforming societies, and you've mentioned this in your work as well. Do you see this as a perhaps perpetual, long-lasting sort of change that digital revolutions will always have a societal impact, or can they be separated from the societal construction?
I don't know about always. It's hard to make those generalizations, but this is not the 1980s where tech and policy were separate. That now tech becomes policy, right? Facebook makes a change and it's felt around the world, right? It has policy impact. Uh, that's likely true going forward, simply because those technologies are so embedded in everything we do. You can imagine specialized technologies that don't have that impact, but I think that's becoming rarer and harder. That I think we are seeing tech policy become de facto social policy. And that gives these companies an enormous amount of power. And in a sense, that can be scary, especially if the company exists in a different country and you don't have political influence over it. Now, if you're a large enough country, you have some influence, but I worry a lot about the smaller countries who just don't have the ability to have any influence. But I think, the internet is so embedded, tech is so embedded in everything we do that I think it's going to be a tech policy, a social policy from here on.
And do you see the increase of surveillance with this? You've mentioned the importance of surveillance in Data and Goliath, I believe, right?
I think so. I mean, these systems naturally produce data. The way the business model of the internet is surveillance is its business model. So these companies collect it, right? I mean, this is the most effective surveillance device ever invented. I mean, we put it in our pocket every morning. And so these things naturally surveil us. Governments use that surveillance in different ways, depending on the government. We can build it differently, but we've chosen not to so far. I'd like to see that changed, but right now, increased technology does mean increased surveillance. Right? Internet of Things is the Internet of Sensors.
Finally, sir, for our last question, what is it that gives you hope about the future of cybersecurity as we move into this, as we move deeper into this digitally linked era, where security and technology play a greater role? There's a lot of uncertainty. What is it that gives you hope, sir?
So I'm largely optimistic. I think humanity has, over the centuries, gotten better, gotten more moral, more inclusive, more secure, safer. We are better off than our ancestors were 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 400 years ago, in almost every way. So I think we are going to figure this out. I think it will take a while. I think it'll require changes in the way government works. I mean, the modern democracy was invented in the mid 1700s and reflects that level of technology. We need to really think about what governance looks like in the 21st century. Even though I'm in security, I think a lot about attacks. I am mostly optimistic that we will figure this out.
And sir, going forward, do you see perhaps an increased role of governments in this domain?
I do. I really dislike that the markets are deciding how this technology works, and I want governments to step in and be the voice of us as citizens instead of us as consumers. So yes, I think there's an enormous role in government. I think government has abdicated its role over the past several decades because they didn't understand it. They were afraid to mess with it. But I really think we need government involvement, especially in things like AI, Internet of Things, all the new stuff.
Any last remarks, sir, before we conclude?
No, this is good. This is fun.
It was an absolute pleasure hosting you, sir. Thank you, viewers, for joining us for this edition of the Geo Interview. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, and have me back. Yes.
Thank you, sir.